Is my mic on? Can you hear me?
Always, yes, always loud and clear, though not always listening.
Welcome back to Original with Subtitles, where the art is real, the stories are layered, and the subtitles absolutely necessary.
I'm Jessica.
And I am Frank. It's been a busy week. SVs are coming up, and that means the V Foundation is getting ready to take the stage here in LA. It's always a very fun time.
Especially the after parties, so very LA.
And we've also just announced our happening elevated perspectives.
We've curated some of LA's leading architects, designers, artists, and cultural figures, an immersive one-day happening blending design, history, and even the art of city planning into one luminous day, an unforgettable evening.
Highlights will include the iconic Eames and Stahl homes, both paragons of the case study movement. We'll go to Schindler's pioneering live workspace, Neutra's visionary Lovell House, and even Frank Lloyd Wright's Hollyhock House.
Speaking of housing, the market seems to be coming back to life. It looks like sellers have accepted more realistic pricing and buyers are starting to step up, all pointing to a robust fall.
Till then, I will be spending more time poolside.
Which brings us to today's guest, the luminous, legendary, and somehow ageless Eric Zener. Your work was one of our first serious acquisitions. The 6-foot-tall painting called Breaking Through was actually a gift from Frank's parents.
I don't know if you know the background of that story, Eric, but
No.
Jessica was 9 months pregnant, and we fell in love with this painting, Breaking Through.
We would literally go to Hespe's gallery almost every other day on Union Street, and he'd pull out a chair and we'd sit in front of it. And going, we shouldn't be buying art. We're about to have a baby. I may stop working. I don't know what we're doing. And we fell so in love with it. I think Frank's parents were just sick of hearing about it. So here I am, like 9 months pregnant, and we're up in our flat in Russian Hill.
I still remember Charlie surprising us. Husby's not a big dude, and he's carrying your painting, fully stretched on the canvas through Capo di Monte, which is one of these old pre-war buildings, navigating the halls, knocking on our door early on a Saturday.
Who's at our door? Knock, knock. It's Charles. I'm like, why is Charles here on a Saturday morning? Open, and then I'm thinking, what have you done, Frank? I'm like, what are you doing with this painting? He's like, it's a gift. We lived with that painting and your vision for over 24 years. So today we're thrilled to have you on our podcast and talk about the mysteries, the metaphors, and the man behind the water.
Diving deep with Eric Zener. Yes,
yeah, puns are my thing. Okay, so let's jump in.
Yeah, Eric, welcome.
Okay.
So good to see you.
Thank
So
you.
first off,
Happy to be here.
how many gallons of metaphor have you painted in your career?
Oh my gosh. I mean, a lot. I've been going at this, full time, as they say, for 35 years now, which is crazy. I don't know how many gallons, but I will say it's an interesting question because I'm going to say somewhere between maybe 18, close to 20 years ago or something like that. When I finish a painting, I would scrape off the rest of the paint that's on the palette. There's always like leftover paint. And instead of throwing it in the trash can or whatever, I started putting it on this blue dish, this big blue dish. Putting it on there. Fast forward 35 years later, it stands about 5 feet tall now as this huge sculpture.
Wow.
That's basically the DNA of every painting that's been painted for decades. And I tell my kids, this is my tombstone when I take the last bus. Just go put this out wherever you plot me. And that'll be my marker, or it could be cool for like a retrospective about, I don't know, maybe, I can't remember, everything was a blur, but 4 months ago, one of the people that works with me posted it on Instagram and called it a Gamblin tower. Because Gamblin's the product, the oil paint product that I've been using for all these decades. And Gamblin saw it and they're like, this is incredible. And they sent, a ton of paint and stuff like that. So I don't know how many gallons, but I know how many feet. About 5 feet of leftover paint.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
The underwater figure, it clearly has become your signature over time. When did you know that you're onto something with water, and water being the prominent feature in your body of work?
Yeah, it's hard to really just plant the flag exactly. Because I think, at least for me, the process of art making isn't sort of pre-thought out in such a contrived way. It kind of it evolves. One thing kind of falls into the next. But having said that, I feel like it was really started to percolate when uh, my former wife was pregnant with our first child. And so just the metaphor of, as kind of cliche as it sounds, is like the womb and the water and, as a source of life and all those kind of things started kind of resonated in me. And it became more of a metaphor for introspection, for life, for origin stories. And I was so impressed with the strength that she had as a young to be mother while I was freaking out with like providership anxiety. And I did a series of paintings of women rowing over these turbulent waves and seas. And it was really kind of a reflection of, her ultimately, of the calm woman in a turbulent sea. So between the low-hanging fruit of what water can symbolize and then some of these more personal allegories, it started to become more and more my thing.
What's super cool about that is falling in love with your painting, breaking through. It was there in the window on Union Street. Jessica was pregnant with our first child. All of these sort of same emotions that I'm feeling. And we were so drawn to that painting. It became our first, I would say, acquisition because, again, mom and dad bought it for us, but acquisition nonetheless. And, it really put us on a path collecting contemporary art. So thank or blame you for that. But I love the fact that when you were working on that body of work, you were going through a similar mindset.
For sure.
Thoughts that I was for sure. Yeah. So that's very cool. 24 years later, knowing the origin story was so similar to our own, and that's the artist collector symbiotic relationship perfectly in play there.
Yeah.
Well, I think it also says like when we talk about when people collect art, I always say, collect what you love. You're going to collect over time, and there'll be these little vignettes in your life. It's almost like a scrapbook of your life. What was going on in your life when you bought this piece? And so a lot of it, that was our story at the time. And interestingly enough, it was also your story. And I think that's where breaking down the barriers between art and audience, knowing that an artist is going through the same process and experience as you, and you just conveyed it a lot better than we would.
And I think it's so cool when, artists and collectors can talk and share stories because, oftentimes that's not the case, which is an interesting sidebar story about the art world is, that doesn't always happen. And so the collector might not really know, the back, some of the backstory to the piece. And for, from the artist's perspective, it's kind of strange to make something that usually has so much personal fabric in it and to not know where it lives for a lot longer than it lived in the studio. You've had that painting a lot longer than I did. So it's kind of neat
that's very cool
when you can talk.
When we got into the art business, the whole idea behind that was having an opportunity for the artists and the collectors or would-be collectors to meet and talk about the art and the process. Oftentimes, with somebody like you, that's a great experience. I've talked to many artists who struggle with capturing water, the motion of the ocean. That didn't come out exactly how, but yeah, I mean, you just captured that so perfectly all these years. It evolved from that painting we have 24 years ago, just where the foundational aspects of the paint and how it was applied to the canvas and how it's evolved, but yet the purity of that brushstroke has remained the same since your early work. I don't know if you see that. You might see it differently.
And I think the tones and the colors too. You've kind of always stuck to a palette a bit that had that Diego Rivera feeling from the 1920s and 30s, and that texture that's been a thread through your work.
Yeah,
especially when you had your boxers.
Yeah, there were a lot more. Yeah, Diego Rivera, a lot more yellow ochres and reds, and much more saturated earth tones. The palette. Going back to what we were saying earlier about the origin of things, it's often in retrospect that I'll see, oh, that's why that happened. I'm not really conscious of it while it's happening. But yeah, I think it's good that things change and evolve. Freedom to grow and change. I think for a lot of artists, musicians, digital artists, change happens. It's self-encouraged, but it generally happens slowly. It doesn't happen fast. It doesn't happen erratically. It just moves as it moves. But then looking back, it kind of like all makes sense.
So if your work had a soundtrack, what songs would be on repeat?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. Parenthetically, I spend an inordinate amount of time alone in the studio. You can imagine lots of hours, lots of weeks, lots of months, lots of years. And so I listen to a lot of different things, a lot of different music, podcasts. I have some super favorite podcasts I listen to. I gave books on tape or books on whatever it's called, books on tape, a try, but too much concentration. Podcasts, you can kind of fade in and out, sorry.
That's all right. We expect people won't listen past now.
That makes it to this mark in our podcast, they get a special gift.
Exactly.
We send it to their home.
You get a free painting.
Yeah.
So it's hard to answer. But I would say if I had to answer, I'm a really, really big Radiohead fan. I was thinking Radio Lab. That's the podcast I like. Radiohead fan. I connect a lot with the lyrics and kind of the vibe of that music. In particular, there's an album called In Rainbows that I have listened to 10 million times. Painting. I kind of can.
Okay.
That's really so. Yeah. If I had to pick one, that's probably it. So, but it's hard though because it changes. It really does.
Since we're going down this path of esoteric questions, where's the weirdest place that you know of that one of your paintings has ended up? I'm thinking billionaire panic room, yacht,
artist panic room,
or yacht bathroom. Yeah, exactly. Do you know of anyone that you're particularly either raised an eyebrow or you said, yeah, that's pretty cool?
Yeah, gosh. Well, a lot of times you don't know where they go. That's kind of like what I was touching on earlier, where it's kind of sad that a lot of times collectors and artists don't connect. It's just the nature of the art world. Weirdest, I don't know if it's weird, but yeah, they've landed on some yachts. I've done some paintings that ended up on ceilings. So you're walking up a spiral staircase, and at the top of the ceiling, there's a circular piece of somebody diving down. So it's like they're diving. Oh. They're diving into the room.
Wow. Was that a piece that you painted on the ceiling as a mural, or did you paint it and they installed
canvas. It? Yeah, installed.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
that was a commission. Usually these sort of like weird ones are commissions, and they're usually, either quite large. I did a piece for somebody in LA that was, I think it was like 15 by 12 feet. I mean, just massive, right? Or interesting shapes, like the mermaid piece. That was a really bizarre shape that had to work around this curved fireplace thing with a giant fireplace mouth. So yeah, the weird ones are usually the custom ones.
I imagine that's a fairly busy part of your work is commission work.
Yeah, and I love doing it. Some artists hate it. I really love doing the commissions. Particularly
and that's great,
because
right?
you get to know the collector and they get to know me, and there's more meaning behind the work. There's a collaborative aspect to it that I think it's just fun for me. I imagine that's what it might feel like to be an architect. Somebody comes to an architect because they like that architect's style, but still it's collaborative, right? The architect's just not going to make you a house and you have to live in it. There's going to be some flow, right? And for me, I enjoy that with painting.
What is your next show? You said you were preparing.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I have an annual solo show at Gallery Hennick in New York for a long time now, 25 plus years or something. And it's either in the spring or in the fall. It's this fall. And there's a whole new evolution and a whole new body of work that I'm introducing, which is exciting. And it's been fun doing a lot of like the pre-marketing. We haven't leaked it out yet, but there's been a film that's been made about it that'll come out, and a host of other things. It's always a little nerve-wracking, but super exciting to put something completely new out in the world.
Do you have a date for the show yet?
October 9th. Yeah, October 9th. And it's usually for like a month. But yeah, it's a great gallery. We've had a great relationship for a long time.
Any sneak
teasers?
peek?
I would say that if I were a writer, that this would be something that's written in the first person, meaning that this body of work really is more of a reflection of parts of me rather than historically the paintings are, I mean, obviously they're from me, but they're not about me. They're more about all of us. So they're they're about emotions, is sort of water as a metaphor for emotion. There's calm water, there's turbulent water, and about how quickly we can change internally, passion, anger, fear, calmness. I'm kind of looking at like emotional states and using water and the ocean as an analog for that. So it's not a huge stretch because I paint the water anyhow, but they're without figures, and the figure is what's happening in the sea. And they're quite large, looser in style, more like the palette of Breaking Through in terms of the water, a little bit more in the grayscale, darker tones. So I really enjoyed making them, but it's always interesting to see. Well, we'll see,
Especially as you're putting your heart on your sleeve.
For sure.
It's obviously a more vulnerable work. And
exactly.
certainly, in that introspective way.
Yes.
So it will be,
100%.
I think, maybe more challenging for you to see your audience reaction.
For sure. 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not self-portraits, but they just come from more of like, this is how I visually feel in a state of calm. This is how I visually feel in a state of turbulence. So that's kind of more what they're about, but hopefully people can connect their own way. I mean, ultimately that's what all artists want, for you to draw something out of it.
We will obviously be in awe over your new work, which is very exciting. So what is the last thing that made you feel awe? AWE, capital letters, boom.
Honestly, my big awe moment was about a week ago when I got to see my middle son graduate from university. And it was an awe of relief. Yeah. It was like, I was so happy. So yeah, that was my awe moment. Yeah.
Is that a miracles do happen kind of moment?
It just, proud dad, but also it's a journey. So yeah. So that was my most recent personal awe moment, was proud dad watching his middle son step off that stage. I was like, yes.
Yeah, congratulations. Yeah. Where did he graduate from?
UC Santa Barbara. That's where I went as well.
Oh,
so
thank you so much for breaking through with us today.
For sure.
It's just been a treat to know you and your work all these years and seeing that evolution, and can't wait to see what happens in October.